Hey, YouTube, welcome to the NFL offseason. Once again, the big storyline is Aaron Rodgers. Will he retire? Will he go back to the Packers? Is he going to go somewhere else? One of the teams that would like to have him is the Jets. I cover the Jets for ESPN's NFL Nation. My name is Rich Cimini. We're joined by Rob Demovsky. He's the ESPN Packers reporter. And Rob, I was adding it up. Between us, we have about 60 years of experience covering our respective teams, which is a little hard to believe, but true nonetheless. And unlike Aaron Rodgers, you're never in the dark. So why don't we start right there? Maybe just update us.
Yeah.
On Aaron's whereabouts right now and a possible timetable for some sort of decision.
Yeah, Rich, the first time we met was when the Packers traded Favre to the Jets, and I was working for the local newspaper, came out to Jets training camp. Feel like I got to go back out to Jets camp if this trade happens again. But Rodgers spends his offseason in Malibu, California. He's out there right now. He's going on this darkness retreat, which he explained as a isolation 4-day, 4-night retreat where you basically sit alone with your thoughts, no devices, nothing. You get a meal and you're in a room and a house and that's it. And I'm guessing that at the end of these 4 days, they say, oh, by the way, you owe me about $75,000 for doing this. Yeah. But he said he's going to start that at the end of this week. As with all things Rodgers, he didn't give the specifics. There's always vagaries in there. Some people thought he was doing it right after the Super Bowl. When he first announced this, he said, I'm going to do it after the Super Bowl. He never said that meant the day after. So he goes on Pat McAfee's show on Tuesday, like he does normally during the season, says it's this week. And I thought the interesting point was that, well, two things. One, he was surprised that this thing became such a story. And I'm like, surprised? How can you be surprised at that? Right?
You got to know that.
Right. And two, he said, look, I'm doing this and I have this scheduled for 4 months. This isn't something I just decided to do. And then because I want to find out what my football future is. This is more about him finding his inner peace. He's done yoga retreats. He's done meditation retreats. So this is not necessarily like he's going into this 4-day retreat and come Tuesday or whatever day he comes out next week, he's going to know, all right, I want to go back to the Packers. All right, I want to retire and live on the beach, or I want to go to trade me to the Jets or the Raiders. It's not going to be that simple. But right. I think the working time frame is similar to what happened last year. On March 8th, he announced that he was going to come back. And then about 6 days later, they did that 3-year, $150 million contract extension. He has always said, I'm not going to hold this team hostage. And I would think he's probably referring to and taking a little shot at Favre, who one time, I went back and looked, Rich, one time he didn't announce that he was coming back until April 25th. So Rodgers is he's not going to do that, so I think if he's retiring or coming back to the Packers, it's an easy thing. He announces it, it's done. If he wants to get traded, then it's a little bit more complicated. He may or may not reveal that, or somehow we may or may not find that out. But then from there, you still have to execute the trade.
So we have to assume he's not going to be checking Rob Demovsky on Twitter for the next few days if he's truly in this darkness retreat. So I think it's really interesting, this timetable from a Jet perspective, because Derek Carr is a free agent right now. Yep. He was released by the Raiders, as we all expected. And I do believe the Jets have interest in Derek Carr. They just hired Todd Downing to be their passing game coordinator. He was with Carr for 3 years in Las Vegas or Oakland or wherever they were at that point, with the Raiders. And Carr actually had some pretty good years with Downing. So the Jets kind of have, they're trying to balance two things. They absolutely want Rodgers. I think he's their number one, but do you risk that and lose Carr? So I think there's a little bit of a juggling thing going on here.
Why do you think, when it comes specific to Rodgers, obviously they need a quarterback. We all know that. The Zach Wilson thing, didn't work out. Why do you think the Jets want Rodgers so bad?
Well, they hired Nathaniel Hackett, their offensive coordinator, and I think this was part of the reason. And you would know this better than I would, but everything I've heard, that Hackett and Aaron Rodgers had a really good relationship from 2019 to 2021 when Hackett was the offensive coordinator in Green Bay. Aaron has spoken like glowingly of the guy. Since then, just recently on the McAfee show. And so that's one of the reasons why the Jets owner, Woody Johnson, he likes big names. He likes to make big splashes. Brett Favre, for instance, 15 years ago, goes out and gets Favre, which was an early August trade.
Yeah.
And so I think that, I mean, and as you hit on, they desperately need a quarterback. They don't want, they're done with the growing pains. They don't want to, go through a transition. They figure if they can get Rodgers, he knows the coordinator, he'll know the offense. It should be a seamless transition. Yeah. And that's why they want him so badly from a Jet perspective. My concern, if I'm a Jet fan, is didn't have a great year last year. Numbers a little down. Was that an outlier, or was that maybe the sign of a decline?
I don't think there's a decline in skill. I really don't. You go back, and this is just one throw, but if you go back and watch the Detroit game, late in that game, he threw a pass on a go route or back shoulder. It was down the right sideline to Romeo Doubs. It was incomplete. It came on Doubs so fast. I would grade it a drop. It was an absolute laser, Rich, probably 20 yards on an absolute line. And he hasn't lost that, right? And even mobility, I still think his mobility was pretty decent. I think where a couple of reasons where he went wrong or struggled. The thumb injury, I think, bothered him more than he was willing to let on. He broke the thumb on the final play of the game in London in week 5. They did not have the bye after London. They played the Jets the very next week. That was the start of the Giants loss in London was the start of a 5-game losing streak. And you really have to wonder if they could have, cut that off, if they would have just sat him for like 2 weeks and the thumb, would have gotten some time to rest, because after their bye week, which wasn't until early December, from then on, his thumb really was not an issue, but he just was unwilling to shut it down, which, to his credit, he doesn't want to come out. He also had a rib injury at the end of the Eagles game where Jordan Love finished up. A couple of weeks later, he had a knee. I believe that was against Miami. He got hit and had a knee injury. That was Christmas Day, late in the year. So it was a variety of things. Nothing like season ending, but I think that was a factor in his performance. Right. I think obviously losing Davante Adams was a huge factor, and his really lack of connection with the young receivers until late in the year when we finally saw Christian Watson, just take off. It was against the Dallas game, against Dallas in week 10, where he had that deep ball touchdown, did the backflip in the end zone. And Randall Cobb had a great line a few weeks later. He said, when Christian Watson flipped, our whole season flipped. And they went on that long winning streak and got themselves back in position. And he wasn't great against the Lions, though. I mean, he just, and the concern that I think you have to have about him is not that his skills decline, not that he can't put up great numbers. It's that when the game's on the line and the season's on the line, is he the difference maker that he used to be? He wasn't against Detroit. He was not in the playoff game the year before against San Francisco, where they lost 13-10. You could go back to the NFC Championship game against Tom Brady and the Bucs in 2001. Rodgers, they picked Brady off 3 times in the second half of that game, and they got 3 points out of it.
Yeah.
I know they scored 20. I think they scored 25, 26 points in that game, but getting 3 points off 3 Tom Brady interceptions is not enough.
Yeah, I think it would be a good move for the Jets. Now, we don't know what the compensation would be, and I think his contract will have to be reworked, so we have to wait to see how that works out. But look, the Jets are desperate right here. I mean, it's been 12 years since they've been to the playoffs. The coach, his butt's going to be on the line next year. The GM's rear end is on the line. They got to do something to try to win. So that's why I'm pretty much in favor of the move. My one concern, though, and I think Jet fans feel the same way just from reading social media, is he going to commit? I mean, because he doesn't do the offseason program. No. That's not his thing.
Well, he would have to, I would think. He would have to.
You got to come in and show that you're into it and that you're committed. That would be a concern for me.
Yeah.
And, he's a little bit of this better. He's a little bit of a flighty guy, does things different. A little bit differently, for sure.
He's a different guy. I don't think he's a bad guy. I don't think he's a bad teammate or any of that. He's just different. I mean, and that's the way he is. And, I think if you accept that, you'll get along with him fine, whether it's a teammate, a coach, whatever. I want to go back to something real quick you said about Hackett and his relationship with him, which 100% is for everything that I've heard is 100% true. But there's interesting thing here, and he's had great relationships with guys like Alex Van Pelt, his former quarterbacks coach, Luke Getsy, who's now Chicago's offensive coordinator, Tom Clements, his former and now once again current quarterbacks coach here. There, Joe Philbin, former offensive coordinator here, became interim head coach after McCarthy got fired. There's one thing those guys all had in common with working with Rodgers, and that was none of them was the play caller. Not one of them called plays. His relationship with those guys might be a lot easier, a lot better, because he doesn't look at the sideline and throw his hands up and, he gets upset with play calls he doesn't like. And, so that's that's a little bit of a cautionary tale, I think, just because he worked well with Hackett and all these other guys in that capacity. Yeah. He's never worked with those guys as a play caller. And Nathaniel Hackett did not call plays.
It's interesting. So they're kind of the buffer between
like
Rodgers
the
and the head coach.
Yeah, it's like the good cop.
Yeah. So if he wants to get pissed at somebody's play call, he could just blame Matt LaFleur, and like Hackett would be the intermediary, like the buffer.
And even Hackett, and I'm not saying this happened verbatim, but Hackett could be like, yeah, you know what, you're right. I'll talk to Matt about that, even if he never talks to Matt about that, right? Like that's things. Good leaders will appease their guys. Whether they're going to really do it or not is another story. And I think Hackett was really, really good at that. Joe Philbin was outstanding at that. But those guys weren't play callers.
Yeah. All right. That's a great point. I didn't even think of that. And obviously Hackett will be the play caller for the Jets. That's why they hired him. They wanted an experienced play caller after going through 2 years of Mike LaFleur, who was a rookie coordinator when they first hired him. Of course, the younger brother of Matt LaFleur. And so I think the offenses will be similar. So I think that part of it from an X's and O's standpoint would be a seamless transition for Rodgers, which I think gives the Jets an edge over the Raiders.
Yeah.
You think Aaron Rodgers at age 39 wants to go to Las Vegas and learn a completely new offense with Josh McDaniels? I mean,
So last offseason, I did a piece where I talked to, I think it was 5 former quarterbacks: Eli Manning, Rich Gannon, Kurt Warner, Dan Orlovsky, and Matt Hasselbeck. And it was about, hey, if you were in Rodgers' situation, this was last year when we didn't know what he was going to do. Would you retire? Would you come back to the Packers? Would you want to go somewhere else? And Rich Gannon made a really interesting point. He's like, look, I changed teams late in my career, and it was a lot of work to learn a new offense. Like it was a ton of work, and you have to be ready to do that work. Now the Jets, it might not be as much work because look, Hackett's going to run the offense that Rodgers wants to run. If he goes to a place like the Raiders or the Colts or whoever may be in need of a quarterback, it might not be Aaron Rodgers' offense. It might be Josh McDaniels' offense. It might be Shane Steichen's offense or wherever he ends up going. Like that's one thing where it would be less work. I'm not saying that he doesn't like to put work in, because he loves football. He loves practicing. He never misses practice if he can help it. But Rich, I thought, that one piece that really stood out from Rich Gannon was just how hard it is to change teams late in your career. And the grass isn't always greener.
Yeah. Brady did it in Tampa, but they struggled for the first half of that year because he was trying to learn the Bruce Arians offense. They were 7-5 at their bye week, and they were really struggling. And I think it took like a meeting of the minds to try to tweak that offense. And they finally started doing more Brady things. And that's when they went undefeated. Go
look at Rodgers' first year under LaFleur. Yes, they were 13-3, but they weren't winning games because Rodgers and LaFleur had the offense clicking right away. It took a while. I mean, those were 2019. Rodgers had, I think, only threw 26 touchdowns. It was one of his lowest touchdowns when he's played a full season. So it wasn't like it was just automatic from the get-go. There was a give and take, doing some of the things that Rodgers liked under McCarthy stuff with. And look, Aaron Rodgers made no bones about it. He hates motion. He hates pre-snap motion. Well, what is the Matt LaFleur, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay offense? It's pre-snap motion. He still complained. Even this past season, he took a shot at, when he said we need to simplify things, and someone asked him, how can you simplify things? And he just goes, less motion. So it's going to be an adjustment wherever he goes, but the adjustment is definitely, probably less with a guy that he's worked with and is willing to run what Rodgers wants to run.
Let me put some Jet perspective on this. They've gone 3 straight years without having a quarterback reach double-digit touchdown passes. So they'll take anything.
26. Yeah, 26 touchdowns would be, and you know, Rodgers has even said that when talking about that year, and you know, we've said it's a down year. He goes, well, that'd be a great year for, you know, 28 of the other 32 quarterbacks. So
Yeah.
it is, you know, people around here are spoiled. I've covered basically two quarterbacks my 26 years covering the Packers. So I guess I sometimes forget, you know, what it looks like in places that don't have this, which is, you know, which is probably 80-90% of the league.
Yeah. Well, since the Jets' last playoff appearance, which was 2010, they have the fewest touchdown passes in the league over that span. Wow. during their 12 years of out in the wilderness, quarterback purgatory, looking for the next guy. So that's why they are hungering for some Aaron Rodgers. So okay, I'm going to put you on the spot, Rob. I know it's very difficult to predict Aaron Rodgers, very mercurial personality, but gut feeling. How do you think this plays out?
My gut feeling is that he plays football in 2023. I don't think he's going to retire.
I agree with
let's remove that option. Okay. I was the same guy, Rich, who I believe was on ESPN radio in the spring of 2021 when Rodgers was disenchanted with the franchise, didn't show up. There was all those things that were going on that he didn't like. I said at that time, I thought there was less than a 5% chance he ever played for the Packers again. I was obviously wrong. So I don't know that I'm great at making these predictions, but it just sort of feels like he's going to play somewhere else. But that said, I wouldn't be surprised if he's back here either.
Yeah.
What about you?
I think he's playing. I mean, just listening to his interviews on the McAfee show, I get the sense that he's playing this year. So I totally agree with that. And again, I'm a little obviously further removed from it than you are. But I think the Jets have a really good shot. I think my gut tells me that he's going to end up in Green Bay. That's just a gut. Yeah. But if it's not Green Bay, I think the Jets are going to get him. I think I'm sure he has a relationship with Davante Adams on the field. We know that. But for the reasons we just talked about with the McDaniels and the Hackett factor, I think the Jets would have a really good shot. I think if I were the Jets, I'd be really careful about this. I would not give up my first round pick for him because it might be a one and done situation. I would give up my 2 this year and then next year a conditional 3 that could go to a 2 or a 1 based on how the team does. Like if the Jets somehow went to the Super Bowl in 2023, then that would go up to a first round pick. So they'd end up giving up a 2 and a 1. And I think they'd be happy to do that if it got them to a Super Bowl. So and that's what I would do for the Jets. And I also would make Green Bay eat a little bit of that contract or have Favre renegotiate because I don't want to pay $58 million for maybe a one and done situation.
Yeah. And if I were the Jets or any team, I don't know that Rodgers would give you assurances that he would play more than 1 year, but I would sure try. And then on the flip side, you know, if I were the Packers, I might try to say, hey, well, okay, if he plays 1 year, this is the compensation. If he plays 2, that draft pick becomes this, or there's an extra pick or something like that, because that's a lot to invest without knowing that he would play more than 1 season.
Absolutely. This is going to be a fascinating story. I suppose he'll be in the darkness for a few days, probably till early to mid next week. And then we'll see. And I'll be in the darkness because I'm going on a little vacation. So hopefully there's no resolution to this while I'm on vacation. But usually that's how it works when you're on vacation. Something like that happens. But
it does seem to be that way in our business.
Are we missing anything? Do you think the viewers need?
I think, Rich, we've got it down to 2 things. He's either playing or he's going to the Jets. So let's see what happens.
All right, great. Rob, this was great. This is really fun chopping it up a little bit on everybody's favorite offseason quarterback, Aaron Rodgers.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.